Mm.
Okay, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, August 20th, 2026, with Tom Van Hyning. Tom is legendary when it comes to Latino baseball. He'll be talking about Ray Noble, Giant catcher in the early 50s. Before we turn it over to Tom, just want to go over a few things. A lot of you saw Norm Coleman on the phone. It was probably talking to his agent with that great article today in the San Francisco Chronicle. Congratulations, Norm. There is no scheduled meeting for next week unless by chance something happens with somebody famous, and I don't envision that happening. So our next meeting is going to be September 2nd with former Giant pitcher Kirk Reeder. So that'll be something to look forward to. And then the following week, it was scheduled for September 10th, but it's going to be moved to Wednesday, September 9th with Jerry Eisenberg. The reason it got moved to the 10th, Jerry never told me that he will be celebrating his 96th birthday on the 10th. And I don't think his wife would be really happy with that. So before I turn it over to Tom, I want to introduce Charles. I hope I'm saying this right. Caracciolo? Nailed it. All right. Charles, unmute.
Sorry, I'm an amateur, a rank amateur.
Uh, uh,
I
did
work
I
in
did,
television. I should know what this is, but
did I
I don't.
nail that name correctly?
You did. Good
How about
job,
that?
man. Nobody does that. When a telemarketer nails it, I let them go for 2 minutes. Otherwise, I hang right up. Thanks. Good job.
Charles, introduce yourself. Tell us what your
Okay.
project is, and if anybody
Okay.
wants to get in
All right.
touch with you.
So my project is I have two partners and myself, and we are doing a documentary about about the genesis of Shea Stadium. We were trying to make a film about Bill Shea, who is the namesake, but there's not a lot about him, and so we're kind of pivoting now to just make it about Shea Stadium overall. Um, and the characters that kind of rise to the top are Walter O'Malley and Robert Moses. And so there's no stake for us in a film that just says O'Malley's a bum, Moses was a racist. So, because everybody, every movie, every book, every whatever in the past has said that. So we're trying to investigate with reaching out to Dodger and Giant fans. It's 70 years almost, 70 years since they moved next year, or, before the genesis of the move. Is it time to re-examine O'Malley? Is it time to re-examine the legacy of Robert Moses? And we're talking to fans of both franchises. We're talking to sports writers. We're not taking a position, but we want to investigate if any of that deserves a kind of, public forum. And, there's a lot to be said. O'Malley was a bum. He was, compared to Stalin and Hitler and Mussolini and Mephistopheles. But baseball, had they not expanded when they did, who knows? Who knows what MLB, does the NFL take it over years earlier? He was a whiz at promotions, ballpark stuff. Yes, he was, not a great guy, and there's plenty of that out there. So I want to find out from kind of the horse's mouth. I wanted to talk to fans of both squads. We're investigating why Horace Stoneham kind of got a pass compared to O'Malley. I know he wasn't as aggressive, but he did move his team and he broke hearts, even though the Giants were not as, a winning franchise and stuff. And they were kind of the third child of baseball in New York at the time. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to look for people who will talk to us, who will sit down and talk to us, preferably in person. But I know a lot of, we might get Jerry Eisenberg. I'm not going to say to Jerry, no, we can't do it on Zoom because we're purists. If Jerry says Zoom because he's Jerry Eisenberg, we're going to do it. I prefer not to because it reminds me of COVID and stuff like that. But that's my pitch is I want to talk to Giant fans who experience this and who feel the hurt or who see it for what it was, kind of a cold, calculated business move. And so that's my spiel. If anybody does want to get in touch with me, Gary has my email. I can give it to you here, but I don't have like a sheet of it or anything. I have a trailer and I have about 16 minutes of the film cut with just VO. Where the VO is now, we would probably sub in interviews saying the same thing or similar things. But we had a lot of steam behind us. We got people from Sabre talking to us. People from the Hall of Fame are talking to us. We got Jerry Eisenberg, who's one of my idols growing up in New York. And so we're trying to gather a little bit of some steam here, and we would love to talk to you guys if any of that is possible. So you can reach out to me via my email. Gary can give you my number, or if there's a better way to do it, put it right on the site. I can do that. And that's me.
Wonderful. Charles, before you
Yeah.
go, I know you've been in touch with Steve Rothschild. He's
Yep.
here he's here
All
under
right.
the name Janice.
Okay.
All right. He's been going under some operations, but he's still
There you
Steve.
go.
Okay?
Nice
Steve,
to
go
see
ahead.
you.
Steve, quick.
Well, yeah, I'm make it quick because we have a speaker.
Hey, how are you?
Been going back and forth. I know you want the in person, but I'm in Arizona.
No, I get it.
I'm gonna be in New York
Oh,
Thanksgiving week. But time. Where are you in New York?
I'm in Long Island now. Used to be in Flushing. That's why I was such a big Met fan. Moved to Franklin Square, Long Island. And listen, we have this no Zoom ever thing until we don't, And so if there are fans who are willing to talk and they happen to be on Zoom and they're wearing an original giant logo hat, then we're going to talk to them. And I'm going to have to climb down off this kind of filmmakers, perch and just say, listen, because I can see right now this Zoom looks better than 6 years ago during COVID. The quality was horrific.
Well, this is good.
I could deal with. I could live with.
The trailer was very good.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, we put a lot into it.
You got my information, so
yes, I do, and we'll be talking soon. All right, let's do that.
It.
Charles, Charles, wish you the best of luck, and anybody who gets in contact with me, I will forward the information to you.
I can't thank you guys enough. This is great. My dad was a big Giant fan, Willie Mays. I have some pictures I got to send you guys. My last little thing. It's pictures at the Polo Grounds, and it's the desktop of this computer that I'm using. Darryl Spencer was New York Giant of the Week. I've checked Retro Sheet. I've checked Rheingold or Knickerbocker, whoever was the beer sponsor. I can't find a week with Darryl Spencer. It says it right on the board. Mays hits a home run in the game. There's a couple of shots. I'll have to send them to you, Gary. And maybe you guys can, you guys, 58 for sure, I think. No, I'm sorry. It can't be. It's 56. 56 for sure. Sorry. And I'll send those to you, and we'll see if we can dig to the bottom and find out what exact game. I'm always kind of a detective when I find pictures like that to see exactly what game. So thank you, guys. Thanks for listening to me. I hope to speak to a bunch of you. Gary and Steve, thanks a million. And
you're so welcome.
You guys. All right, guys. Thanks again.
Tom, before I bring you on, can I spare one more minute of your time?
Sure, as long as I can cover my material.
Absolutely. Sure. Dan Levitt. Dan, unmute.
I'm here.
30-second for Sabre. Go.
Well, we just had our annual convention in Cleveland, and I'm hoping some of you were there. It was great as always. Had a great player panel, a lot of great presentations. And the big thing that I've sort of been working on is our new strategic plan, how we're going to grow, how we're going to increase research resources, how we're going to have better relationships with other groups. And we're going to be unveiling that sometime in October. So more to come if you're interested.
Wonderful. And lastly, I see maybe a half a dozen people in here. They might be friends of Tom's. If what we're doing interests you, just email me. I'll add you to our list, and you could come to any meeting you want or come to no meetings, whatever floats your boat. With that all being said, I'd like to reintroduce Tom Van Hyning. Tom has been here many a time. Tom, thanks for volunteering to speak to us tonight. I am going to I'm going to share my screen, actually. Share. Let's see if I do this. Does that show up?
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah. Can everybody see it? Good. And Gary, I'll just give you a quick command to move them along.
You got it. Let me see if I can just move this thing out of the way here. Hold on. Perfect. All right, Tom. Welcome back.
Thank you. Actually, I think I'm I think I'm a little bit like Dusty Rhodes tonight, because I think I helped Gary. I put this together over a 3-day period, and it was a lot of fun for me because I've been doing some research on, of course, some of the Cuban players. So this for something that Saber's doing later in October. So this is very helpful. Next slide, please. We good? Next. Yeah. So Rey Noble, it's pronounced Noble. In English, I think they call him like a noble guy, noble, but in Spanish it's Noble. And he was from a kind of like a sugar cane cutting area, eastern Cuba. He was born in mid-March of 1919. I believe he passed away in Manhattan at the Cabrini Medical Center at age 79. He actually stayed in Cuba throughout most of the 60s, but for whatever reason, economics and others, he came back to New York, and I believe he operated a liquor store in Brooklyn. And anyway, so he lived in New York City the last 3 decades of his life. His parents worked in the sugar mill industry. He comes from his background, his ethnicity is obviously Cuba, but also some Jamaican, because there were, I think from the mom's side, possibly West Indies, Jamaica. So I think his English was okay. One reason why he was so strong, he used to carry 325-pound bags of sugar while he was a kid on the plantation. He, just like Shoeless Joe Jackson, played for mill teams in South Carolina, etc. Ray played for a number of mill teams. The best team was the Riflemen from 1942 to 44. Now, during World War II, he got 3 at-bats for the Havana Reds. That was his very first incursion into pro baseball at age 23, but he only had 3 at-bats with no hits. However, he became a celebrity in Panama in the mid-40s by winning the batting title in the brand new Panama Winter League. He batted .380, and actually, within a year, he was catching Luis Tiant Sr. with Cienfuegos, his first year with Cienfuegos. But believe it or not, in 60-61, the very last year that Cuba had a professional winter league, he actually caught the younger Tiant with the Havana Reds. So I believe this fellow, Noble, is the only catcher in pro baseball history that caught both the father and the son. So that's kind of interesting. Next slide, please. A prior presentation of mine for Gary and the whole New York Giants group talked about Alex Pompez and several other promoters. Well, in late 1920, John McGraw somehow was able to get Babe Ruth to join the New York Giants for some exhibition games in Cuba. But actually, Cristobal Torriente, who was a very good outfielder hitter, he actually out-hit the Babe. And in one particular game, he homered off Babe Ruth, who came in to pitch that game. So that created a lot of enthusiasm in Cuba, obviously. And it also showcased some of the Negro League players who were very talented at the time. Next slide, please. Cool Papa Bell was one of the better imports. In Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican, the importados, the imported players are very valuable. However, every team is only allowed so many imports. Well, Cool Papa Bell was probably in his mid-20s when he first came to Cuba. And I believe it was 1929-30, just around the time that Wall Street had that meltdown. Cool Papa Bell helped the Cienfuegos team win the pennant. Now, back then, and even through to 1960, Cuba did not have playoffs, like minor leagues do. If you won the regular season, you were the champion. An exception would be if the teams were tied at the regular season, they might have a best of 3, just like Brooklyn and the New York Giants did in 1951. Next slide, please. Tiant Sr., who I mentioned a minute ago, was a very talented left-handed pitcher. And not only was he a teammate of Noble with Cienfuegos, in a minute I'll talk about the New York Cubans and the Negro Leagues. But when Noble went to Panama for a great hitting season, Adolfo Luque, who actually earlier won a game for the 1933 New York Giants in a World Series, Luque managed a very talented pitching staff in Cienfuegos that had the barber Sal Magli, Adrian Zavala, who was Cuban, the great Dihigo, Tiant Sr., and a Canadian guy named John Roy. So anyway, Cienfuegos had a lot of history by the time Noble joined them for the 46-47 season. Next slide, please. The Cubans played in the old Negro Leagues. However, later, as I'll mention later in my presentation, they're now considered big league status. Noble, I believe, is in the middle row on your far right, right behind the Tiant, who was right there. Noble is the big guy in the second row, kind of with a very talented team, primarily from Cuba. But next slide, please. I'll show a couple
Yeah,
things
here
about
is this is
Tiant Senior.
Tiant, right, and here's Noble.
There you go. And I hope you can see the photos. But in 47, the year that they won the World Series, in the regular season, he had 54 at bats. He shared the catching duties with an American guy, Lou Loudon, Louden, who you'll see in a minute. I'd like to mention Alex Pompez again. It was Alex Pompez who in 1948 convinced Mr. Stoneham to sign, that Noble signed with the Giants. Alex Pompez did the same thing for Monty Irvin. Monty Irvin was playing for the Almendares team in Cuba, 48-49. And just before the 49 Caribbean Series, Mr. Pompez, helped orchestrate a deal where Monty Irvin eventually became a New York Giant, actually. I see Janice said that something about the niece taught with me. How about that? Next slide, please. Okay, so I hope you can see the fine print here, but real quickly, the lineup of the 47 Cubans included leadoff Muñoz at third base, Diaz Pedrosa, who was a great second baseman too, batting second. He was the best hitter on that team part of the year, except for Muñoz. Cabrera, his nickname was Chiquitin Cabrera. Garcia was a great shortstop. Claro Duani in right. Noble shared the catching duties, hit 6. Cleveland Clark, despite his name, Cleveland Clark was actually Cuban, and the Rabbit Martinez was from the Dominican. Anyway, during that World Series, Noble hit a grand slam in Game 4 that basically was the turning point that allowed the New York Cubans to win 4 games over the Cleveland Buckeyes. Next slide, please. Let's see, Retro Sheet. If you're familiar with Retro Sheet, I was able to locate a few of the games. Noble in the Retro Sheet documents that I looked at went 4 for 10 and knocked in 7 runs with a double and a homer. It was that 5th inning grand slam that turned the tide in that series. And guess what? In the final contest, Game 6 at Cleveland, as visitors, his 2-run double helped the Cubans win their World Series, and it was Pompez's, I think, first and only championship in the Negro Leagues, in the World Series, that is. And the top 3 pitchers, I believe, were Tiant Sr., the lefty, Pat Scantlebury, another lefty from Panama, and Dave Impo Barnhill, who was only about 5'6", but was a very good pitcher. Next slide, please. Right. So here's a little bit on, I know we're talking about Noble, but let me say something about Adolfo Luque, who was quite a character himself. I did mention that he won Game 5 of the 1933 World Series. Believe it or not, he was 8-2. He was in his early 40s, and he won 8 games and lost 2. His ERA for the 1933 champion New York Giants was 2.69. The team ERA was 2.71. And Luque's whip, walks and hits per inning pitch, was 1.17, which was just better than the team 1.19. Luque, as a hitter, went 5 for 19, 263. And one of you was talking about the low batting averages. Well, the team batting average for the 1933 New York Giants was actually 269, which was actually Luque's batting average in 19 at-bats. But anyway, let's go to the next one, please. Napoleon Reyes, this guy was a real character. He later became very heavy. He got to weigh about 300 pounds by the early 1960s. But in the in the 40s, he was a little bit thinner, and he was the first, I believe, Latino position player with the Giants during World War II. He was also a student at the University of Havana. So unlike many of his other counterparts in Cuba, Napoleon actually went to college, and he was Noble's teammate with Cienfuegos. If you look at your history with Sal Magli, Mickey Owen, and others, he actually jumped to the Mexican League to make more money in 1946. He was quite a character as a manager. Next slide, please. Many of you, I think, are familiar with Danny Gardella. He was another teammate of Noble with the 46-47 Cienfuegos team. In 1947-48, playing for the other teams, including Santiago, he had 10 home runs to lead that Federation League. But he also jumped to Mexico. However, these jumpers could also play in Cuba. For example, they were not punished, okay? So they were actually able to earn some money during the winter. Next slide, please. Okay, Roberto Bobby Maduro. Some of you may remember him. He was an assistant to Bowie Kuhn for a while in the commissioner's office. But before then, he was a co-owner of the Cienfuegos Elephants, a fairly well-to-do businessman, had a very interesting family history. He also owned teams in the minor leagues, including the Havana Cubans in the Florida International League, and he also joined the Sugar Kings. So he was actually a visionary who had a lot of good ideas, and he moved up. He also, I think, owned the Jacksonville Suns in 1964. So he actually, did different things in baseball. Next slide, please. Here we have some of Noble's stats, his first 5 Cuban seasons. This might be of interest to some of you historians. His first manager with Cienfuegos was the great Martin Dihigo. I think that was interesting. His second manager was the funny left-hander from the Yankees, Lefty Gomez. And another manager this time was a Hall of Fame second baseman named Billy Herman. And I found that quite interesting. And Noble actually, starting in 47-48, he played quite a bit, for these managers, and I think they appreciated his expertise. Next slide, please. So here's the great Dihigo. I don't want to spend too much time on Dihigo. I did mention him in my presentation on Mr. Pompez, but we mentioned Luque. Well, Luque won 106 games in the Cuban Winter League, but guess what? Dihigo won 107, so they're both 1 and 2 in Cuban Winter League history. Unlike today's pitchers who only pitch 4 or 5 or 6 1/3 innings at the most, Dihigo actually pitched 121 complete games in Cuba, and those seasons were like 40, 50, 60 games. So imagine how durable Dihigo was. In 1938, for example, he was 18 and 2 for Veracruz in Mexico with an 0.90 ERA. Johnny Mize was from Georgia, and Mize also, believe it or not, played for the Yankees, the Giants, and the Cardinals. Johnny Mize was quoted as saying that the best player that he ever played with was Martin Dihigo, and that's because during the mid-1930s, Mize played for a team called Concordia, based in Venezuela, and Mize was a teammate of Dihigo's only for maybe a week or two, but Mize was extremely impressed with this guy. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned Lefty Gomez, who I hope this is an accurate depiction, but according to the expert, they said he's third left to right, the great Lefty Gomez. Well, on your far right, at least on my far right, there was a future Brooklyn Dodger star named Carl Erskine. I'd like to mention that today, as we speak, I'm in Elkhart, Indiana right now, and Carl Erskine's hometown is Anderson, Indiana, which is only about 150 miles south of where I sit today. So I thought that was one of the reasons why I'd like to mention Mr. Erskine. And if you look at the stats, I hope you can read this at the bottom, but he was 9 and 7 with Noble behind the plate with a 2.94 ERA. So like I've said many times before, Winter League Baseball was very instrumental in the careers of a number of native players, but also many American players. Next slide, please. A lot of people do not remember this, but Willie Mays actually wore the uniform of a Cuban team called the Almendares Scorpions. However, he never got to play a game for them because while he was practicing the week that he came to Cuba, he hurt his ankle. I believe he got some injuries, and the New York Giants called the team ownership in Cuba and said, Willie can stay down there and do a little practicing, but do not put him in any games. The reason why Mays flew to Cuba was because an outfielder named Dick Williams, who later became a Hall of Fame manager with Oakland, the Angels, the Padres, etc. Dick Williams was a regular outfielder for Almendares, but because the Korean War was really ongoing, Dick Williams was pressed into military service. So that's how Willie Mays got to become Lasorda's teammate with Almendares. Next slide, please. The four Cuban teams, by the way, if you can see this little square here, the A team stands for Almendares, the Scorpions. H would be the Havana Lions. M is the Marianao Tigers, and C is the Cienfuegos Elephants. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're transitioning to Ray's minor league just with the Giants. During a period of 4 seasons, late 40s, early 50s, he played for Jersey City in 49. He played for the 50 and 52 Oakland Oaks in the Pacific Coast League. And he played for the 53 Minneapolis Millers. And if you look at his stats, hopefully they're somewhat impressive. He had a .298 batting average his 4 years in the Giants system. I believe that his best year would have been for a manager named Charlie Chuck Dressen. In 1950, he batted .316 with 15 homers. Next slide, please. This is a picture of him with the Oaks. By the way, they played a 200-game season, and in 1950, they were the champions. They won 118 games, and they lost 82. Can you imagine losing 82 games and being the champion? But that's because they played 200. Next slide, please. Okay, so Mel Ott managed him. In 1952, the great left-handed hitter from Gretna, Louisiana, Mel Ott managed Noble. And my understanding is that Mel Ott, Billy Herman, and Dressen all had favorable impressions of Noble's catching and pitching ability. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of him with the 1951 Giants. He's about 5'11". I think he was listed at 5'11", 210, but he's probably, he was built like Mike Tyson. To give you an example, I mean, he was very broad-shouldered, very strong, and the few times that he actually got into fight with people, he usually won. I mean, he won. I mean, without a doubt, nobody really could mess with him. Next slide, please. Two reasons for putting Gene Bearden next to John Fort Smith. Why would I do this? Well, Gene Bearden became a teammate of Noble's with the 55-56 Elephants in Cienfuegos. This was after Bearden was on the decline. On the other hand, John Fort Smith was Noble's teammate with the 1949 Jersey City team. And because of Alex Pompes, who was scouting in Puerto Rico, and Pompes became a friend of Santurce owner Pedrin Torrilla, for whatever reason, John Fort Smith was recommended to Sonam, and Fort Smith did sign with the Giants, but I don't believe Fort Smith never actually pitched for the parent team, but he was a very talented pitcher and also a World War II hero. In Puerto Rico, they called him the lieutenant. Next slide, please. Okay. In 1951, the 4 African-American players early in the season, now left to right on your screen, Monty Irvin, who had a great season, Artie Wilson, who primarily played winter ball with the Mayagüez team in Puerto Rico and impressed, with winter ball. And then you had Hank Thompson, power hitting. He could play third base or the outfield. And of course, Noble. Now, my understanding is that Artie Wilson was demoted so that Willie Mays could be promoted in May of 51. So I've had a question or two about how did Willie Mays join the team ball. I think Artie Wilson was dropped. Next slide, please. One of Puerto Rico's heroes was Luis Canena Marquez, who was a great player with the Homestead Grays. He played against Noble's New York Cubans in the Negro Leagues, but ironically, on April 18th of 1951, in the very same game that Noble made his initial game for the New York Giants, Canena Marquez was the first, black player that played for the Boston Braves, the future Milwaukee Braves. And ironically, Canena was signed by the New York Yankees after outstanding year with Aguadilla in 48-49, but never played for the Yankees because Elston Howard in 1955 became the Yankees' first African-American player. Next slide, please. Okay, so how many of you, those of you born before 1948 might remember the slogan, spawn insane and pray for rain? Well, in 1951, Noble's first home run for the New York Giants actually came off with Warren Spahn, and this was before Bass hit a dramatic home run off the same left-handed pitcher later in May of 51. And sadly for Noble, in Game 6 of the 1951 World Series, Johnny Shane struck out Noble on a 3-2 curveball in the eighth inning with the Yankees up 4-3. So that was probably one of Noble's saddest moments. And the irony of the whole thing was that Johnny Shane was from Havana, Arkansas, not from Havana, Cuba. So we'll go to the next slide, please. In 1951, he had the most at bats with the Giants. For some reason, he was demoted most of the 52 season, and he came back to play a bunch of games in 53. Some of you know John Burbridge, who is a graduate of Lehigh University, and John presented at Cleveland recently. I got to attend his session on Frank Robinson. Anyway, John sent me an email today saying that because of his granddaughter's softball game, he couldn't make this presentation. But John asked me, what was Leo DeRocher fair with his handling of Noble? And my gut feeling was that while Leo DeRocher was a very good manager, very charismatic, good with Willie Mays, very good later with Cesar Cedeno with Houston, for some reason, I get the impression that DeRocher, I don't know. I feel that Noble should have had more playing time, and I'll leave it at that. Next slide, please. In 1951, he did go 4 for on May the 9th of 51, which was the year that Bobby Thompson hit that famous home run. On May 9th, he went 4 for 6 in his best hitting game, knocked in a 73 win against the Cardinals that day. Whitey Lockman and Alvin Dark both went 4 for 5. And Sal Magley, who pitched in Cuba earlier, won that game to go 3-2. Now, Noble was somewhat helpful in the New York Giants winning a few of those games late in the season, because he obviously did play in a bunch of regular season games for Mr. DeRocher, but he only played in Game 3 of that famous tiebreaker, which ironically ended with a home run off Ralph Branca. I believe that Willie Mays was on deck, would have been the next hitter, and Noble would have been the hitter after Willie Mays. So Noble was in the dugout when Bobby Thompson hit that famous home run. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of my friends, I'm proud to say that I was a classmate of one of Ruben Gomez's sons, Rafaelito, in the mid-1960s, and I got to know Ruben Gomez quite well, actually. And he mentioned several times to me that before he pitched to Valmy Thomas, when he and Valmy were able to shut out the Los Angeles Dodgers, April 15th of 1958, 5 years before that, Ruben told me that his first New York Giants win in complete game came with Noble behind the plate. And Ruben told me several things about that game. First of all, he said that he liked Noble. He liked him very much. Secondly, he joked with Noble because earlier that year, the Santurce Crabbers actually won the 1953 Caribbean Series in Havana, Cuba. And that was the only time, the first time that a team from Puerto Rico, and the only time that a team from Puerto Rico ever won the Caribbean Series. So Ruben joked told me that he told Noble that, we beat Cuba in the Caribbean Series, but you've helped me, beat the Chicago Cubs. So I just wanted to mention that as a friendly thing. Next slide, please. The Cubs were defeated by Gomez 11-1 at the Polo Grounds. Only 14,515 people saw the game. It lasted just under 3 hours. By then, at that time, that was a pretty long game. Noble scored 2 runs, got 2 walks. Ruben went 2 for 4. Ruben was actually a good runner and a good hitter and a good fielder. In Puerto Rico, Ruben Gomez actually played the outfield many times. Lockman had a good game, so did Davey Williams. You can hopefully see the lineup at the bottom of this slide. I won't read all the names to you, but I found it interesting that Bobby Thompson batted 7th in DeRocher's lineup. And I guess obviously Mays was in the service. So that's the main reason why Bobby Thompson would play center field back then. Noble hit in front of Gomez. Okay, I'd like to say something about Ray Cott. I don't know if you are aware of this, but obviously he has a World Series ring with the 54 Giants. He and Wes Westrom did a lot of the catching in 54. But some of you may or may not know the fact that he played against Noble in Cuba 2 different years, 51-52 and 59-60. And something happened that Ruben Gomez told me about, and a former Santurce pitcher named Craig Anderson confirmed this. Back in 62-63, Santurce was playing up in the postseason, and guess what happened? Cott was the manager, and he tried to intervene and break up a fight between Valmy Thomas and a pitcher with Caguas. And Cott ended up with badly bruised ribs and broken leg. And for a number of months, he was out of the picture. And I believe Cleveland wanted him to manage in '63. He was a coach, and for whatever reason, his career was on hold because of that postseason fight in Puerto Rico. I thought I'd mention that. Next slide, please. Prior to Luis Tiant making his big league first start with Cleveland in 1964, this was the best. Pascual was the best Cuban pitcher from, I would say, the mid '50s into the '60s, and then Tiant, of course, took over a few years later. But some of you may find this kind of amusing. I did in 1953-54. After one lousy game with Marianao, the management of Marianao sold or traded Cabilo to the Cienfuegos team for 12 baseball bats. That's one of the more infamous trades in Cuban Winter League history. But Camilo and Pedro Ramos both have told sports writers years ago that they really enjoyed pitching to Rey Noble. Next slide, please. With the Elephants, now we're talking about the middle part of his career from 51 to 56. Several of his managers at that time were Billy Herman, Hall of Famer, and a guy who later got some bad publicity named Alex Campanis. I guess I had the fortune of corresponding with Alex Campanis 30 years ago, primarily about when Campanis scouted Roberto Clemente in Puerto Rico. But believe it or not, Campanis also managed Noble with Cienfuegos in 53-54, only for one season. And Campanis actually spoke pretty good Spanish. So anyway, here's some of his stats. But guess what happened in 51-52? After Noble had 2 pinch hitting appearances for the 51 Giants, he nearly won the batting title in Cuba. So I think Noble wanted to prove to Leo DeRocher and to Mr. Stoneham that he was a good hitter. And for whatever reason, Noble had his best Winter League season ever in 51-52. Next slide, please. In Cuba and in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican, what they do at the end of the season, the writers and the TV people later, of course, choose the all-star team. So Noble was the all-star catcher, and Bert Haas, who won the batting title, was the all-star first baseman. Sandy Amoros, any of you, I don't think there are too many Brooklyn Dodger fans, but Amoros was an outfielder with the Brooklyn team mid to late 50s. Anyway, I mentioned the tight batting race that Noble narrowly lost. Next slide, please. Here's some logos for the Cienfuegos Elephants. One of their logos is "We walk slowly, but we will crush you." That was sort of like their little message to the other teams. And obviously they wore green. In the photo, that's not a very clear photo. Noble is in the first row, I believe. But anyway, that's and the baseball that you see at the top of the photo is signed by Bob Boyd, the baseball is signed by Bob Boyd, who I presented on him during Jerry Malloy Negro League conference in Memphis, Tennessee a few months ago. I co-presented on Bob Boyd, who was originally from Mississippi, and Bob Boyd was one of the teammates of Noble in the 55-56 season. Next slide, please. So the All-Star team, again, Noble repeats as catcher on this All-Star team, along with Bob Boyd. Hector Rodriguez was a good third. Jackie Brandt, many of you saw Jackie Brandt he's in his early 90s, I believe. Isn't he like 92 years old?
Yep.
And Jackie Brandt, actually, in one of our interviews 30 years ago, Jackie Brandt told me that one of the thrills playing in Havana and then playing later in Puerto Rico was that he got to pick up Spanish. See, Jackie Brandt loved to go to the horse races in Cuba, and he also went to the horse races in Puerto Rico with Pedrin Zorrilla, the Santurce owner. Brandt loved the horse races, and Brandt became friendly with Cepeda in Puerto Rico, and they chit-chat a lot in Spanish. Vinegar Ben Maisel from Mississippi originally was the top pitcher in Cuba. But believe it or not, he struck out 206 guys. The only guy in Caribbean Winter League history, in my record books, that surpassed 206 was a guy named Satchel Paige. And Satchel Paige got 208 strikeouts for a team in Puerto Rico back in 1939-40 called the Guayama Witches, the Brujos, a team that was put together by the Rotary Club of Guayama, but that's a whole different story. Cienfuegos won the pennant in 1939-40. They won 40 games. And guess what? They also win the 56 Caribbean Series in Panama. Next slide, please. Again, now here's a photo of two buddies. Camilo Pascual, who later became a pitching coach. If I'm not mistaken, Camilo, 20 years later, well, 20-some years later, he was a pitching coach for the 1979 Minnesota Twins. I believe Paul Hartzell, who may be on this call, I'm not sure, but Paul was a pitcher who on that pitching staff when Camilo was the pitching coach. But they worked well together. And by the way, Camilo was MVP. Noble was MVP of the 1956 Caribbean Series with a 400 batting average. Camilo went 2-0 with a 2.0 ERA. Next slide, please. In this Caribbean Series that took place in February, 70 plus years ago, Cienfuegos went 5-1. Camilo and Ramos both went 2-0. I like the kid Lasorda because even though Lasorda did tell me that he was a good pitcher in Cuba and Puerto Rico during the regular season, he didn't do too well in the postseason in this Caribbean Series for Caguas. But, it is what it is, right? Bob Boyd had 11 RBIs to lead. Bob Boyd told me over the phone that one of the reasons why Noble didn't get that many RBIs in that series was he drove in most of them. So next slide, please. Okay, the All-Star team for this Caribbean Series included Noble. Another guy that I interviewed was Lou Limmer from the Bronx, New York, who played very well for Caguas that year. Vic Power, known in Puerto Rico and elsewhere as Victor Peyote, the 7-time Gold Glove winner in the American League, played a very good third base for Caguas that year. But the Elephants, as I mentioned here, were 5-1, and their pitching was excellent. 2.55 ERA and a whip of 0.98. Next slide, please. As we move toward the end of Noble's minor league career, we noticed that he still hit pretty well at the minor league level, starting with the Cuban Sugar Kings. Obviously, there was a comfort level there, playing under Mr. Maduro, who was a great guy, obviously, to play for. And he had a lot of home runs. For example, in 57 and 58, he was a teammate of the great hitter, who we'll just say in a minute, Luke Easter. Next slide, please. Luke Easter, those of you who followed his career probably know that he had some good years with the Cleveland Indians, but he had some even better seasons in the minor leagues. And in 1957, he hit 40 home runs. In 58, he hit 38. And of course, Noble hit 20 in 58 and 22 in 57. So not as many, but from what I understand, they got along very well. Next slide, please. Jim Bunning was another guy who benefited tremendously from winter ball. He pitched against Noble with the Marianao team. And Bunning mentioned, I believe I talked to him, in a written interview survey that I did. He mentioned the name of Connie Marrero. Marrero was about 5'5" tall, but Marrero pitched pretty well for the Senators, considering how bad the Senators were. And during bullpen sessions, it was Marrero who helped Jim Bunning perfect his slider in Cuba back in the day. Next slide, please. The All-Star team in 50. Here we go. Noble by then is 38 years old. He makes the All-Star team again in 57, 58. Tony Taylor, who I interviewed, was on that team, as well as Minnie Minoso. Marianao won the pennant. However, because Noble was still such a good catcher in his late 30s, Napoleon Reyes called him on the phone and said, I want you to reinforce my Marianao team in the 1958 Caribbean Series. Next slide, please. Now, Brooks Robinson did not play in the Caribbean Series because, however, a lot of people may not know this, but Brooks Robinson played second base at age 20 for Cienfuegos. So can you imagine before every inning, when the Elephants pitcher would throw the last pitch to Noble, he would throw the ball to Brooks Robinson at second base. So obviously they had some form of at least a player relationship. Brooks did hit 9 home runs that winter for Cienfuegos at age 20, and he tied Pancho Herrera and 2 other players for the league lead. And Brooks Robinson, in other interviews, talked about how helpful the Cuban Winter League was for his career. Next slide, please. The Caribbean Series in 1958 would have been Noble's second Caribbean Series. This was held at the old Sixto Escobar Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Noble went 5 for 19, a 263 batting average, which, by the way, was 25 years earlier. That was what the New York Giants hit as a team. So 263 was not a bad average, really. And he actually had 6 runs batted in, and Minoso did pretty well. And the great Roberto Clemente played center field for Caguas, had a 391 batting average, scoring 6 runs. Lou Limmer, who I really enjoyed talking to several times, hit 2 homers, and his good friend Vic Power knocked in 8 runs for the Caguas team. And as I may have mentioned, Limmer and Power were teammates with the 54 Philadelphia A's before that franchise moved to Kansas City. Next slide, please. The legendary Minoso, just like many players, they signed autographs. They were great with the fans. This little child has the little Marianao uniform, the Tiger. They were the Tigers. And believe it or not, it took 75 years after Minoso and Noble helped win the 1947 World Series. 75 years later, Minoso finally made it to Cooperstown. So I guess it's better late than never, right? Next slide, please. Finally, Noble's final minor league seasons were a team called the Houston Buffs. Well, guess what? At age 40, he was good enough to hit 15 homers and hit nearly 300. So actually, he played just as well at age 40 as kids half his age did that summer with Houston. And then we'll go to the next slide now. This is from a book, so it didn't come out so clearly. This is a very fine baseball team. This was Camilo Pascual's 59-60 season with the Cienfuegos team, the team that won 48 games. The manager was Tony Castaño, who actually was a teammate of the great Joshua Gibson in Cuba back in the late 1930s. This team included Cookie Rojas. Lou Hernandez wrote a history book about Cookie Rojas. Next slide, please. In the 1960 Caribbean Series, which was the very last time that a Cuban pro team played in the Caribbean Series, Cienfuegos went undefeated, 6-0. Noble only had 1 at bat. Obviously, he was a backup catcher. George Altman, who I've interviewed, hit very well. Tony Gonzalez, who very good player, very good outfielder. Rojas only had 7 at bats. Tommy Davis actually officially won the batting title because the experts said, well, he had 22 at bats, and that's another discussion. But Tommy Davis was the MVP of that Caribbean Series. I consider him like the Bobby Richardson of that series, because in 1960, the Pirates beat the Yankees in 7 games, and Bobby Richardson was the MVP, even though the Pirates won the World Series. So Tommy Davis, even though Caguas didn't do so well, Tommy Davis got the votes for MVP. Next slide, please. These are some of his final stats with Cienfuegos for Rey Noble. Obviously, 1957-58 was his last very good season. It kind of went a little bit downhill after that, but remember, he was already approaching 40, and professional baseball in Cuba was abolished after the 60-61 season. By the way, Noble's final season was with the Havana Reds. He left Cienfuegos after 59-60. Next slide, please. Some of his legacy, part of his legacy, a lot of people will find this very strange, but Noble actually hit more home runs than Minnie Minoso did career-wise. Noble has the career record for 71 homers. He was very consistent. He more than Roberto Ortiz and Formental, who was a great slugger himself, 4th in RBI, just behind Minoso. 6th in at-bats. Fermin Guerra was a former manager and player. 8th in hits. Those of you who followed old Washington Senators, maybe some Atlanta Braves baseball, they had a catcher from Cuba named Paul Casanova, a very decent catcher, good player. And he opined with an interviewer years ago that Noble was Cuba's best all-time catcher, bar none. So I take that as a good compliment. Next slide, please. This is where Carl Erskine comes in again. why am I including Sandy Koufax here? Well, in Game 1 of the 1963 World Series, Sandy Koufax struck out 15 New York Yankees to set an all-time record. Well, guess what? 10 years earlier, 10 years before this tremendous feat by Mr. Koufax, Erskine struck out 14 Yankees. And this was when I believe Mr. Dressen, Charlie Dressen, who actually managed Ray Noble, told Erskine, I want you to start Game 3 because, Erskine did not pitch that well in Game 1 of the 53 series. But anyway, Erskine struck out 14 Yankees, I think October 2nd of 53, and exactly, literally 10 years later, Koufax struck out 15. So I think this is very important historically, and I apologize to the New York Giants fans, but I thought this was an important slide to mention. Next slide, please. Here's some final quotes that I got from some of my interviews. Obviously, I couldn't include all of them. Altman considered that Noble was very sharp, very intelligent, obviously, but even though he was a backup at the time. Ed Bauta, I did Ed Bauta Saber bio a few years ago. Ed Bauta and Luis Tiant, the younger Tiant, were on the Havana rotation when Noble caught a lot of their games. And of course, Bauta talked about Noble being a plus and un buen guajiro. A guajiro basically is a country, sugarcane agricultural worker, grew up on the farm, but, a good fellow, because Bauta himself worked in the sugarcane fields. So Bauta, as a former sugarcane worker who dropped out of school at age 11, had a certain comfort level with his catcher, who also had to help support his family. Tony Taylor told me that Mr. Noble was a gentle giant baseball player. Don Zimmer, who I interviewed in March, I think, of 1993, Zimmer was in his early 20s when he joined Cienfuegos, and he even remembered that his catcher Noble nearly won the batting title. Zimmer apparently had a very good memory. Next slide, please. Here's Noble's composite. He had a 267 professional batting average. Actually, Johnny Bench, if you look at Johnny Bench's batting average of Cincinnati, I think it was close to 267. Of course, Bench is in a class by himself, so I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying that a 267 batting average at the time, considering the competition that he was up against, was pretty good, and he hit over 200 home runs in pro ball and hit pretty well, in certain postseason games. Next slide, please. I decided at the end to include Ed Bauta again. Bauta was the pitcher for Havana. Bauta later told me that his best season pro ball was with Costa Rica in the Mexican Summer League. And at age 38, Bauta won 23 games, and his buddy on that team was another 38-year-old lefty named George Brunet. Brunet pitched until age 50 in Mexico. Bauta retired at age 40, but and by the way, as a 10-year-old kid in Puerto Rico, I got to see George Brunet pitch a game for Preston Gomez when Gomez managed the Crappers. And that team had Juan Terin Pizarro, Ruben Gomez, Lou Johnson, who played with the Dodgers, and many other good players. Next slide, please. And finally, it's almost obviously it's almost 8 o'clock. So, and I've been going for about 45 minutes, I think. No, less, because I've been going for about 41 minutes. Well, I told Gary that I'd finished at 42 minutes, so here I am. Well, I want to thank all these folks from Altman to Zimmer, but I'd especially like to thank Jorge Colom Delgado from Puerto Rico, who facilitated a couple of photos and some baseball history. Adam Dorowski, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the past year. Adam provided the Panama Winter League batting stats for Dorowski, which were very helpful. Obviously, Ruben Gomez, who passed away a long time ago. Lou Hernandez, for, of course, Mr. Bobby Maduro expert. And I'd like to thank a fellow from Venezuela who I don't know, but he was the one who facilitated a photo of Carl Erskine congratulating Sandy Koufax and some of the other guys. So thank you for your time today. Gary, can I answer a few questions if that's possible?
Absolutely. Let's all give it up for Tom.
Okay.
You guys can unmute. Tom, okay. Just a few comments before I ask my one question. I don't know of any Latino researcher who knows more than you. It's unbelievable, your knowledge, and not only your knowledge, but the pride that you take in talking about your mother country, so to speak, is just so commendable. So thank you with that. My other comment is, Norm and Mars and maybe even Eric, on Saturdays when the Giants play at home, they have these Los Gigantes uniforms. And I think it's imperative that you write a book about the San Francisco Giant Latino connection. There's so many players, and you'd be just amazing at that. And my one question regarding Ray Noble, do you feel his major league career was short because of the age that he came up at, or it just wasn't,
Yeah,
the top notch?
yeah, right. Well, you're right. The combination, right? Because at age 30, he catches his first game with the Giants at age 32. However, there's also a little stigma because, the language barrier. Even a catcher named Javi Lopez from Puerto Rico told me that Javi Lopez is 6'3" and played well for the Braves. But he told me that even in the early 90s, some of the Atlanta Braves scouts and minor league managers had higher standards for him because coming from Puerto Rico, even in the early 90s, there was some doubt as to whether, catchers from Puerto Rico with language skills. But I think Benito Santiago helped dispel that because when Benito became National League Rookie of the Year with the '87 Padres, that helped. So to answer your question, I think in the late 40s, 50s, even into the 60s, there was a little bit of a stigma. I think there were some stereotypes, and I think that hurt his cause. I really do.
Tom, again, thank you for always doing these great things. Mr. Frank, you are up first.
Tom, thank you. This has just been wonderful, very, very educational. In the few times you've been on here where I've been on, I always realized how unknowledgeable I am as to professional baseball in Latin America. I hear these cities and I hear the names of these teams like the Elephants. I don't think I ever heard that until tonight.
Yeah.
How was professional baseball actually organized? Was it international teams with leagues and then they would play a Caribbean-wide World Series? How was it actually organized? How did it work?
Well, I mean, before you had the Caribbean Series, just before the professional leagues, you also had the Amateur World Series. So you had teams from Venezuela, Cuba, Panama, Mexico, and Puerto Rico playing an Amateur World Series, and that created some enthusiasm. And then you had something called the Inter-American Series, which began. A team from Brooklyn called the Bushwicks traveled to Caracas, Venezuela, to play in the first ever 1946 Inter-American Series 80 years ago. They played a team from Caracas, a team from Cuba, and a team from Monterrey, Mexico. So you had some enthusiasm with that series. But then prior to February of 1949, thanks to a couple of Venezuelan businessmen and people from Puerto Rico and Cuba, you had the momentum for the first Caribbean Series, which was played in Havana in February of 1949. And that was a World Series that Monty Irvin played in. And the fact that Monty Irvin played in that series and that he had just signed with the New York Giants, that gave, I think, the Latin leagues, the Caribbean Series in particular, more credibility. And a future Hollywood actor they called the Rifleman named Chuck Connors, he had a pretty good Caribbean Series. So that, even though that was not televised, that gave a little bit of momentum so that by the time that 1950 came around, however, Cuba has had Winter League baseball prior to that, and the Puerto Rico Winter League started in 1938-39. Jorge Colon Delgado has documented a romantic period in Puerto Rico pre-1938 where people like Josh Gibson and George Scales, a lot of the famous Negro Leaguers went down there. So there's a lot of history there, even before the official Winter Leagues.
My wife is Nicaraguan. I go down there frequently with her. Baseball's huge down there.
Yes.
And, they've got several professional teams, and it's a tiny country. But they tell me that it's so popular because the U.S. Marines, who were there 4 times in 75 years, brought it with them. And they never gravitated to soccer. They gravitated to baseball for the reason of the U.S. influence.
Yeah, and
But
real quickly, Nicaragua. I mentioned the Inter-American Series, which is not the Caribbean Series, but Inter-American Series had a second revival in the early to mid '60s, and the team that the General Somoza owned, the Cinco Estrellas, the five-star team, upset the Puerto Rico, the San Juan team that had Cepeda, Clemente, and Jose Pagan on it. So when Cinco Estrellas won that February '64 Inter-American Series, that gave momentum to Nicaragua. However, that civil war in Nicaragua in '67 pretty much ended the Winter League there for a while. But yeah, the enthusiast Dennis Martinez told me that of course Mr. Clemente inspired Dennis Martinez. I had mentioned the Amateur World Series. Well, Roberto Clemente's last involvement in baseball was managing Team Puerto Rico in the December 1972 Amateur World Series, where Puerto Rico, I think, came in 6 out of 16 teams. It was very competitive, and that devastating earthquake came later that year. But so Dennis Martinez, I think, pitched in that Amateur World Series and was very complimentary of Clemente and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of history intertwined between Nicaragua and Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. The great Norm Coleman.
Tom, thank you so much. Every presentation you give, I get these visual images of my old baseball cards, and they come alive. And it's just so great for me. I have one comment and then one question. The comment is you mentioned Rabbit Martinez, the 1947 Cubans, and he has a significant influence on the Giants. Robert Martinez was hired by Alex Pompey as a bird dog scout, and he's responsible for the first wave of Dominican players, Juan Marichal, the Alou brothers, Manny Mota. And so I thought that was important to mention for the New York Giants group.
Yes.
And the question is, you showed a great baseball card when Noble was on the Oaks. It was a black and white card, and I'd like to find that card and buy that if I can. Is that a Remar baking card?
Oh, I think I found it on the internet under, I Googled, Rey Noble baseball photos, and
Okay.
So if you, it's a visual. Was it clear enough? Could you see it clearly enough? Or?
Oh, it's a beautiful card. It's beautiful in simplicity. It's a black and white card.
Yes.
I love those cards. And so
Well, I could, if I could, find the link. Obviously I had to copy it. I had to copy it from the internet to a file to a JPEG, So
okay, I'll see
I think you can copy it very easily.
Okay, but I want to find the card and buy the actual card.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not a collector, so I wouldn't know how to.
Okay.
Maybe some of your friends might help. Some of your collector friends might, might.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Norm. Mr. Eric, you're up.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. My gosh, I want to echo what Gary had to say. The amount of knowledge that you're able to provide in about 40 minutes worth of time is absolutely incredible. It's just it boggles my mind. And I again, thank you for being able to share this. A question I have, and also another comment. I love how you link other players' history. I think that's very imperative in understanding when you're talking about a specific player. You kind of use your research and you branch out a little bit, and you're able to tell other stories about other people, and it gets you more intrigued on what these other players also did. So again, thank you for that awesome presentation. Question about Noble's receiving prowess. How was he behind the plate as a receiver? And was there anything in your research where you saw what other pitchers may have said about how he performed behind the dish?
Well, I would say, at least concerning the Winter League, the decade and a half in Cuba, I think the comfort level, from what I've read, was pretty good. Both the American pitchers and Ramos, Pascual, and others, including Ed Bauta, who pitched to Noble when Noble was already like 41 years old, said that he was very easy to pitch to, easy to communicate with. There could have been, now there may have been some minor roadblocks with the Giants. Wes Westrom was probably a fairly good defensive catcher and who had some power. But I just from the numbers alone, I still believe that Noble should have played maybe at least 3 or 4 more seasons, hopefully with the New York Giants, even before Valmy Thomas joined them in 57. I would say that from 54 to 56, at minimum, he should have been a backup catcher. Now, Ray Cott was a decent backup catcher. I'm not going to take away anything from him. But I mean, but of course, nowadays, they talk about framing, and like a great catcher from Puerto Rico named Yadi Molina became an expert at that, and hopefully will enter Cooperstown in a couple of years. So I can't really speak to framing because I don't think they kept those stats back then. But maybe if you talk to if you had that movie Back to the Future and could talk to Luis Tian Sr. and to the Higo and maybe to Adolfo Luque, maybe they could better inform you than I could about his defensive prowess. But I think the fact that he was comfortable behind the plate maybe was a good thing. But he was also big for a catcher. So whether or not that's good or bad, I can't really say. But the players that I spoke with, the few I spoke with, were very comfortable with him behind the plate.
Thank you, Eric. Ken, welcome aboard. You're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Really enjoyed it. I'm kind of here because I talk about Ray Noble and the 51 Giants like once a month at least. It's probably the third or fourth time this month. I'm in Clearwater now. I'm a Hoosier native from Lafayette. I hope you're above water up there. Anyway, I conducted a trolley tour in St. Petersburg of the spring training history. And in 51, Del Webb, who owned the Yankees, wanted to train closer to his home in Arizona, so he and Stoneham traded. And the Giants were here in St. Pete. And somebody with the Giants executive called one of the Negro leaders in St. Pete and says, we need housing for 8 players because they couldn't stay in a hotel, obviously. Neither could they in Arizona at that point in time. And so they did. Well, they only brought 4. You know, of course, we should almost all be familiar with the quota in the major leagues of 4, even though the Dodgers violated, but they had the 2 starters, so they should never have more than 4. So Willie Mays and Ray Dandridge were stuck in Sanford, Florida, between Orlando and Daytona. We missed Mickey Mantle's rookie year and ended up in Arizona, and we missed Willie Mays. DeRocher wanted Mays, and Stoneham told him no. DeRocher set up a game in Sanford and went up and watched him himself on a day off, and Mays amazed him, and again begged Stoneham. Stoneham said no because he's going to military any minute. And so they leave camp. One thing in camp, I don't know, you Giants fans may want to investigate this, but one game you got Hank Thompson at third, Wilson's playing second, Monty Irvin's playing first, Noble's behind the dish, and Thompson goes over to the shortstop out dark. He says, "You realize you're the only white guy in the infield." So I don't know if that happened in a regular season or not. Somebody may want to research that. So that was all 4 on the field at the same time. So anyway, of course, they get off to the poor start, and finally Stoneham gives in to bring Mays up. And Stoneham says, under one condition, you got to send a Negro down. So Thompson and Irvin are starters, so that leaves Noble and Wilson. And DeRocher had some good comments about Noble as his catcher during the spring. So ended up being Artie Wilson, which is kind of a tragedy for Wilson because when he went down to the PCL, got 200 hits a year for the next 3 years and never saw the majors again. But the Giants were on Wilson to pull the ball, which he did not do very much. It may have had something. He lost about half his thumb when he was 19. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, or he was always a high average guy, so maybe he just let the ball get deep before he hit. But so Wilson was the guy sacrificed, not Noble.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. Ed Freer, you're up.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much, and a nice presentation, Tom. Just as a side note, at a golf tournament once, I had picnic lunch with Louis Tiant. So he was a very nice fella. My first New York Giants game was, of course, 1954. So I remember when they left, and it was kind of hard to take. My question for you, and it's kind of speculative, so maybe you can't answer it, but if Walter O'Malley had been able to cool his heels, wait for an expansion team to move to the West Coast, and say the Giants were still playing in 58, 59, 60 in New York, how would they have been received by the Latino community, which was so large within walking distance of the Polo Grounds?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you had, I'm trying to think. Yeah. A friend of mine, Art Lopez, who was born in Mayaguez, West Puerto Rico, he grew up, at age 10, he moved to his family, he moved to the Bronx. So he was more of a Yankee fan, but and the Puerto Rico community was growing, but I'm not sure exactly. See, I'm trying to think. I mean, I think there's some public relations things that probably could have been done in a better way. But I believe that the move out west was really about better financial deals and all that, and better parking, and maybe a growing population. Regardless of the Latino community in particular. Now, if you look at the Giants team just before they left New York, I don't think they had well, they didn't have a Latino superstar. Now, if Clemente had stayed with Brooklyn, eventually, yeah, but that's a different story. But I don't think the Giants really. See, Cepeda was a rookie in '58, and Jose Pagan joined the Giants later in San Francisco. So right. So I don't. I'm not sure about that.
Let's just say
it's a good question,
Marichal pitched, say, in Polo Grounds for 4 years. Would
yeah,
they,
but okay,
would they have
60, right.
responded?
Yes, 60 he joined the Giants, San Francisco in '60, but then the Mets joined the team. Right, '62. I see what you're saying.
It's just speculation. That was all I
Yeah,
was
speculation. Yes. Yeah. Now you also, real quickly though, you also probably could look at the games that Juan Marichal pitched for the Giants. Let's say at the Polo Grounds, like in '62, '63. How many more fans went to those games as compared to that? See, that would be interesting.
We all went to see the Giants come back. But
Right.
I think the Latino community would have really packed the Polo Grounds. That's what I think.
Yeah. Right.
But thank you very much.
Ed. Mr. Mars, you're up.
Well, thank you, Thomas. That was very interesting presentation. Well, I think Ruben Gomez might have been the only starting. Well, he was starting pitching, of course. I don't remember being any other players besides Ray Noble from Latin America. And the thing about Artie Wilson, it's kind of disheartening to hear, when you think about Horace Stoneham bringing up all these Latin players, and an Afro-American, Artie Wilson, to even it up with roommates 2-2, and Artie Wilson, if he stayed, would have been the fifth. So that kind of puts a little damper on Horace Stoneham's motivations. I should say that. What do you think about that situation? Should I have kept him, and therefore he would be the fifth black player on the team?
You're talking about say that who's the
Artie Wilson.
Artie Wilson. Yes, Wilson was right. Yes, he would have been at worst. He could have been a reserve infielder. But I believe they had Alvin Dark and Eddie Stanky were the double play combination.
Right.
And I don't want to get into the racial stuff too much, but that may have been somewhat of a factor, because Artie Wilson probably would have. Those were the two positions that Artie Wilson was capable of playing pretty well at the time. And I think earlier one of your questioners talked about the fact that Artie Wilson was more of a slap hitter. But the bottom line was Artie Wilson was talented enough. I personally feel that Ray Dandridge got a raw deal. Ray Dandridge, when Willie Mays was promoted from Minneapolis to the New York Giants in May of '51, Ray Dandridge was really playing tremendous baseball for the. I believe that Ray Dandridge should have been on the '51 Giants.
That's true.
I mean, but again, in addition to Artie Wilson,
I wanted to mention
six.
You mentioned two names, and I remember seeing them pitch for the lowly Washington Senators, and then I think they both went on to the Twins. with the move, and that was Pedro Ramos and Camilo Pascual. They didn't have great stats, but do you know about, let's see, were they both from Cuba? And
Yes.
were they they must have been outstanding pitchers in Cuba.
Yeah, they were. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned in my presentation, that they were a pretty solid 1-2 punch in the rotation during a number of regular seasons. As a matter of fact, in Caribbean Series history, Pascual is 6-0. He's the only undefeated pitcher in Caribbean Series history with 6 or more wins. Ruben Gomez was 6-2. A pitcher named Bracho from Venezuela was 6-4. And then there's a fourth guy who came, more recently won 6 games. And Pedro Ramos was 5-1 in Caribbean Series history. Camilo Pascual is in the Caribbean Series Baseball Hall of Fame, and Pedro Ramos should be, but isn't. So yes, they're very legendary, talented, and the people in Cuba appreciate the fact that they would pitch so many innings with the Senders, but if the big league general manager allowed them to pitch in Cuba, the fans appreciated that because they look forward to watching them pitch.
There was one other pitcher that was being scouted, but apparently he didn't have a good enough fastball, and that was Fidel Castro.
Yeah, I guess so. Right, and yeah, he had some talent, but you know,
Not enough.
it didn't. He decided to study law and get into politics, I guess.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thomas. Very interesting.
Thank you, Mars. Janice, you're up.
Nice try. Nice try. I'm sorry I missed a good portion of your presentation. Was what I heard was terrific. But I'm going to see you in December when you're addressing my group. Camilo Pascual had like a big time curveball.
Yes.
When he came in. That's number one. Now Ray Dandridge, I know he confronted Stoneham. Is either 50 somewhere along that line, saying you couldn't even give me 1 week, and kind of walked away. But I want to get back to Lou Loudon for a second. Yeah. My first Cooperstown trip with a school group, my neighboring teacher was named Gloria Outerbridge. She was the niece of Lou Loudon, and she said, when you go to Cooperstown, see if you see anything about my uncle. Oh, who's your uncle? Lou Loudon, because I had never heard of him. Satchel Paige, Buck Leonard, Josh Gibson. Lou Loudon I never heard of. Well, for those that are not aware of this, when you go to the Hall of Fame, if you go into the library area and you talk about a player, which is what I did, I went in and said, do you have anything on Lou Loudon? I'm going to be here till about 2:30. Well, when I left at 2:30 with the kids, I got a whole folder of articles, photos, which I brought back to the school to Miss Outerbridge and, made her day, so to speak. Good resource. Do you use the Hall of Fame at all for your resources, Tom?
Yeah, well, I'm a member. Yeah, I'm a member.
Yeah.
So I get their magazine and some very valuable emails.
Yes.
And so yeah, I appreciate that, and I would like to say too that, without going into a lot of detail, that there are over 100. Well, if you include Puerto Rico, which has the most inductees in Cooperstown, who also played winter ball in Puerto Rico, and then you have Cuba and etc. I mean, it's a very substantial list. Yes.
Well, on a last note, Manny Ramirez was on my 6th grade basketball team in 1985 while I was teaching, and there was another student who is now the bullpen coach for the D-backs, and he was the pitching coach during the World Games. He was in the dugout next to Pujols. His name is Wellington Cepeda. No relation to Orlando. He's Dominican. Anyway, just throw that out. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Do we have another question, or?
I was gonna. Does anybody have a question who does not know how to put up the yellow hand? All right, then. Why don't we all, Tom, just fabulous. Let's all give it up to Tom Van Hyning.
Fantastic.
Tom, you were great. You really were.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to end this recording. Again, there'll be no meeting next week unless I get some news on a front that I'm working on. Otherwise, we will see you September 2nd with former Giant. Hey, you know what? Where is Steve? Steve, are you still here?
Well,
Steve.
Janice.
Tom spoke of Ray Noble's best friend. Why don't you tell Tom what happened when we went to that game in 2004? Oh, you were left. His best friend was Ruben Gomez.
He died that week. He died that Wednesday.
He
He
died-
didn't make it to
died.
that.
Yeah, Ruben Gomez died yes, yes.
We
in
were going
70
to the 50th anniversary of the 1954 World Championship in 2004, and Gomez died right before, right? The
Yeah,
week
there was
prior or something?
19 players.
That's
And
great.
then when he died on Wednesday before, it was 2 days before, 18. And they were all there, all 18 of them.
Wow.
Wow. He died
All
in
right,
2000. We sure did.
Yeah.
We sure did.
Anyway, again, Tom, thanks, and we will. I'll hang around for a little if anybody wants to talk about our group or Giant Baseball. So, again, all the people who showed up tonight who are not in the group, if you're interested, you can hang around. I'll tell you my email or just email me, whatever it is, if you have my email. But have a great week, everybody, and stay well.